The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber stretched 12 stories high, carved from black stone that had witnessed 3,000 years of interstellar politics. Ambassador Marcus Kane felt the weight of 700 alien gazes as the doors sealed behind him, with a sound like distant thunder. The chamber itself defied human understanding of architecture, a vast sphere that seemed to curve infinitely upward, with platforms housing alien delegates arranged in spiraling tiers that disappeared into misty heights. At the center of this impossible space stood the Judgment Platform, a disk of pure crystal suspended over an abyss that glowed with the light of distant stars. Kane walked across the narrow bridge leading to the platform, his footsteps echoing in the absolute silence. Behind him followed the entire human delegation, 12 representatives from Earth's greatest nations, their faces carefully neutral despite the magnitude of what they faced. High Arbiter Veltar materialized above the platform, her form shifting between solid matter and energy, as her species had evolved beyond physical limitations. Her 4 eyes, each the size of a human head, focused on Kane with the weight of galactic authority. Around the chamber, translation devices hummed to life, preparing to carry her words across hundreds of different languages and communication methods. Representative of the species called humanity, Veltar's voice resonated through quantum speakers that made the air itself vibrate. You stand before the assembled might of the Galactic Council, accused of violations that threaten the stability of our civilization. Kane raised his head, meeting her gaze without flinching. The human delegation had prepared for this moment for 3 years, ever since the Council had issued their first warnings about humanity's expansion rate. What they hadn't expected was the sheer overwhelming presence of galactic power concentrated in this chamber. "We acknowledge the Council's authority," Kane replied, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space without amplification, a human trait that still disturbed many alien species. "We are here to answer your concerns." Veltar's form solidified as she began the formal charges. In the span of 3 centuries since achieving faster-than-light travel, humanity has established colonies on 47 worlds across 16 star systems. This rate of expansion exceeds that of any known species in recorded galactic history. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. The Corvan Empire's representative, a massive reptilian creature whose scales shifted color with emotion, displayed patterns of deep concern. The Altani delegation clicked their mandibles in rhythm, their equivalent of nervous laughter. Even the ancient Miralani, who communicated through color changes in their crystalline bodies, flickered with hues that indicated shock. Furthermore, Veltar continued, humanity has ignored 17 official council directives regarding territorial expansion limits, resource extraction quotas, and established buffer zones between civilizations. Kane remained perfectly still, but those who knew him well could see the slight tension in his shoulders. The charges were accurate. Humanity had indeed pushed boundaries that older species considered sacred. What the Council didn't understand was why. The Council also notes, Veltar's voice grew colder, that humanity has consistently refused to submit to standard population control measures, continuing to breed at rates that older species abandoned millennia ago as unsustainable. This time the murmurs were more pronounced. Population control was one of the fundamental principles of galactic civilization. Species that refused to limit their growth were historically viewed as threats to be contained or eliminated. Finally, Veltar announced, intelligence reports indicate that humanity has been developing military technologies in violation of the Peaceful Expansion Accords, including weapons systems designed specifically for ship-to-ship combat. The chamber fell into complete silence. Military technology was the ultimate taboo in Council space. The last species to develop weapons of war had been the Zerathi, and their entire civilization had been systematically dismantled by Council peacekeeping forces. Kane stepped forward, his movement deliberate and measured. "High Arbiter, may I respond to these charges?" "You may speak, human." Kane's voice carried across the chamber with surprising strength. "The Council accuses humanity of excessive expansion." "This is correct. We have established 47 colonies in 300 years. He paused, letting the number sink in. "However, the Council fails to mention that these colonies support a population of 14 billion humans who were facing starvation and resource depletion on our homeworld." Surprised, chittering came from the Rigelian delegation. 14 billion was a staggering number by galactic standards. Most species maintain populations of a few 100 million at most. The Council notes our refusal to submit to population controls. Kane continued. This is also correct. Humanity has chosen a different path than our galactic neighbors. We choose growth over stagnation, expansion over limitation, hope over fear. The reptilian Corvin delegates' scales flashed warning colors. Such defiance was unprecedented in council chambers. As for our military technology, Kane's smile was barely visible but somehow carried across the vast space. Humanity has indeed developed defensive capabilities. We learned long ago that the universe is not always peaceful, and those who cannot defend themselves become victims of those who choose aggression over diplomacy. High Arbiter Veltar's 4 eyes narrowed. Human Kane, you speak as if the Council's guidance is somehow insufficient for your species' needs. Kane's response came without hesitation. With respect, High Arbiter, the Council's guidance assumes that all species share the same goals, the same limitations, and the same willingness to accept boundaries imposed by others. Humanity does not share these assumptions. The chamber erupted in shocked vocalizations from dozens of species. No civilization had ever challenged the fundamental principles of Council authority so directly. Veltar raised her hand for silence. The Council finds humanity guilty of all charges. The sentence is immediate compliance with all expansion limitations, population controls, and military restrictions. Refusal to comply will result in economic sanctions and potential military intervention. Kane listened to the sentence with the same calm expression he had maintained throughout the trial. Then he spoke words that would echo through galactic history. High Arbiter, humanity respectfully declines to accept the Council's jurisdiction over our civilization. The silence that followed was absolute. In 3,000 years of galactic governance, no species had ever rejected Council authority outright. Furthermore, Kane continued, humanity hereby formally withdraws from all Council territories, trade agreements, and diplomatic relationships. We renounce any claim to Council protection or support. Veltar's form flickered with shock. Human Kane, you understand what this means? Your species will be alone in the galaxy, without allies, without trade partners, without protection from hostile forces. Kane's smile broadened slightly. High Arbiter, humanity has been preparing for this possibility since our first contact with galactic civilization. We choose freedom over security, independence over subjugation. He turned to address the entire chamber, his voice carrying to every delegate present. The Council fears humanity's growth, our technology, our refusal to accept limitations. Perhaps that fear is justified, but you should have asked yourselves a different question. Not whether humanity is dangerous, but what we might become when you force us to stand alone. Kane turned and walked back toward the entrance, followed by the entire human delegation. Their footsteps echoed in the stunned silence of 700 alien civilizations who had just witnessed the impossible. Species choosing exile over submission. The massive doors sealed behind the departing humans. High Arbiter Veltar felt something she had not experienced in centuries of service. Genuine uncertainty about the future. The Council had gained compliance through fear and dependency for 3 millennia. They had just encountered a species that feared neither isolation nor the unknown. Darkness between the stars. What the Council didn't know was that while they had been debating humanity's fate, human colony ships were already disappearing from their monitored systems. Not fleeing in panic, but moving according to plans that had been decades in the making. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity had been preparing for this day since their first encounter with the Council's restrictions. And in the vast emptiness between spiral arms in regions of space the Council considered worthless, something was waiting that would change the balance of power forever. The trial was over. The real test was about to begin. Admiral Lisa Rodriguez stood in the command center of the UES Defiance, watching displays that showed the greatest migration in human history. Around her, holographic screens tracked the movement of 200 colony ships as they departed from 47 worlds simultaneously, carrying 14 billion human souls into the unknown darkness between galactic spiral arms. Admiral, we have confirmation from all sectors, reported Commander Blake, his voice tight with controlled tension. Complete civilian evacuation achieved. 0 casualties reported. Rodriguez nodded. her eyes never leaving the tactical display that showed human territories emptying with mechanical precision. Behind each evacuation was months of careful planning, secret meetings and preparations that the Council had never detected. While the galactic government debated humanity's future, humans had been preparing for independence. Status on the resource extraction? Rodriguez asked. Complete, ma'am. Every useful mineral, every piece of technology, every scrap of infrastructure has been removed or destroyed. The Corvin Empire will inherit empty shells. Through the command center's viewport, Rodriguez could see the last transport ships departing from New Geneva Colony. The world that had housed 3 million humans for 2 centuries now stood empty, except for automated systems that would self-destruct once the evacuation was confirmed complete. The Council species rushing to claim abandoned human territories would find nothing but worthless rocks orbiting dead stars. "Admiral," interrupted Lieutenant Hayes from the communication station, "priority message from Earth Command. General Patterson is requesting immediate conference." The main screen flickered to life, revealing General Patricia Patterson in the deep underground facility that had become humanity's true seat of government. Behind her, walls of quantum computers processed data streams from across human space, coordinating an operation of staggering complexity. "Admiral Rodriguez," Patterson began without preamble. "Phase 1 is complete. All civilian populations have been successfully relocated to the void sectors. The Council species are already moving to occupy our former territories." Rodriguez studied the intelligence reports flowing across her displays. "How quickly are they moving, General?" "Faster than anticipated. Corvin battle fleets are establishing military bases on 17 former human worlds. They're not just claiming territory. They're preparing for major offensive operations." The tactical display shifted to show Corvin ship movements throughout former human space. The pattern was unmistakable. Forward supply bases, staging areas for invasion fleets, strategic positions that could only mean one thing. "They're planning to attack someone," Commander Blake observed quietly. "Not just someone," Patterson replied grimly. "Intelligence indicates the Corvin Empire has been using humanity's departure as justification for what they're calling the Stability War. They claim our exodus proves the galaxy is destabilizing, requiring immediate military intervention." Rodriguez felt cold understanding settle in her stomach. "They're going to use our former colonies as launching points to attack the Council's weaker members. The Altani Confederacy is first on their list," Patterson confirmed. 18 billion peaceful beings who have never threatened anyone. The Corvin consider them genetically inferior and suitable for elimination. The command center fell silent except for the hum of quantum processors and the distant vibration of the ship's massive engines. Rodriguez stared at the display showing Corvin fleets positioning themselves around worlds that humans had called home for generations. "General, what's the status of Project Deep Shadow?" Patterson's expression shifted to something resembling satisfaction. 47 research stations fully operational in the deep void. The automated shipyards have exceeded all projections. We're producing vessels at 10 times our previous capacity. And they have no idea? The Council considers the regions between spiral arms worthless. Too few stars, too little useful matter. They never bothered to explore past the outer marker buoys. As far as they know, humans have vanished into empty space to slowly die of isolation. Rodriguez turned to study the star charts, showing humanity's new domain. The void sectors had earned their name honestly. Vast regions where stellar density dropped to nearly zero, where older civilizations found nothing worth claiming. But humans had spent 2 centuries developing technology specifically for these conditions. While the Council debated territorial boundaries, humanity had been building infrastructure in the spaces they considered uninhabitable. "Admiral," Hayes called urgently, "long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the Altani home system. Multiple Corvin battle groups moving into attack positions." Rodriguez watched the tactical display update in real time. 16 Corvin dreadnoughts, supported by over 100 escort vessels, were positioning themselves around Altani Prime. The defensive fleet, 43 outdated Altani ships, wouldn't last 6 hours against that firepower. "General Patterson, request permission to activate the Watchers." Patterson was quiet for a long moment. The Watchers were humanity's most closely guarded secret. Thousands of cloaked surveillance drones that had been monitoring Council space for decades. Activating them would reveal capabilities the galaxy had never imagined. Admiral, once we activate those systems, there's no going back. The Council will know we never really left. Ma'am, 18 billion civilians are about to die because the Council's incompetence enabled a war. The Corvin are using our departure as an excuse to commit genocide. We can't just watch. Rodriguez turned to address her entire command staff. Ladies and gentlemen, when we left Council space, we told them humanity chooses freedom over security. But freedom means nothing if we use it to hide while innocents are slaughtered. Commander Blake stepped forward. Admiral, the Altani were among the few Council members who argued for moderation during our trial. They tried to find a compromise, and now they're going to pay the price for the Council's failure, Rodriguez replied. General Patterson, what are our current force capabilities? Operational fleet strength is currently at 200 vessels, with another 50 completing final systems checks. All ships are equipped with quantum stealth systems and weapons technology the Council has never encountered. Rodriguez studied the displays showing human fleet positions throughout the void sectors, ships that had been built in secret shipyards, crewed by volunteers from the outer colonies, equipped with technology that made them effectively invisible to Council sensors. General, the Council exiled us because they said humanity was too dangerous, too aggressive, too willing to use force. Maybe they were right about our nature. Rodriguez paused, watching Corvin ships move into final attack positions around Altani worlds. But they made one critical error in their judgment. What's that, Admiral? They assumed dangerous meant evil. They never considered that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy is someone willing to fight for what's right, regardless of the cost. Rodriguez turned to her communications officer. Open a quantum channel to all fleet commanders in the deep void. Authorization code, Prometheus Rising. Across the void sectors, 200 human warships received the activation signal. Vessels that had waited months in the darkness between stars, their crews training for a war they hoped would never come. The galaxy thought humanity had retreated into exile. They were about to learn that humans had been preparing for something far more significant than mere survival. All ships, prepare for emergence from stealth mode, Rodriguez announced. Target, Corvin battle groups threatening Altani civilian populations. Rules of engagement, protect the innocent, eliminate the threat. She paused, studying the faces of her command staff. Ladies and gentlemen, the Council wanted to know what humanity would do with power. Today we show them. Admiral, Blake asked quietly, what about our strategic advantages? Once we reveal our capabilities, Rodriguez's smile was cold as the space between stars. Commander Blake, the galaxy is about to learn that humanity didn't run away to hide. We left to build something the Council couldn't imagine. Through the Defiance's viewports, she could see the distant glow of human fleet formations moving through the void. Ships that represented decades of secret preparation, crewed by people who had chosen exile over submission. The Council feared our expansion, our growth, our refusal to accept limitations, Rodriguez continued. They were right to fear us, but they never asked the right question. Not whether humanity was dangerous, but to whom. As human ships began their journey back to Council space, Rodriguez felt the weight of 14 billion lives behind her decision. The galaxy had forced humanity to choose between submission and isolation. They had chosen a third option, independence backed by strength that no one had seen coming. The Council was about to discover that sometimes the most terrifying enemy is the one you drove away in anger, gave time to prepare, and underestimated completely. Humanity was coming back. And they were bringing friends. High Arbiter Veltar stared at the emergency displays surrounding her elevated platform in the Council's crisis center, watching 17 different star systems erupt into warfare simultaneously. Red indicators marked fleet engagements, orbital bombardments, and planetary evacuations across a region of space that had known peace for over 1,000 years. The chamber that had once hosted diplomatic debates now resembled a military command center, with alien technicians frantically coordinating defensive responses to an enemy they had enabled through their own incompetence. Status report on the Altani home system, Veltar commanded, her four eyes dimming with exhaustion. She had not left the crisis center in 72 hours, watching helplessly as the galactic order collapsed around her. 16 Corvin dreadnoughts have begun orbital bombardment of Altani Prime, reported Counselor Thane, his translator struggling with the clicking urgency of his species' language. Planetary defenses have been eliminated. Civilian casualties are estimated in the millions and rising. Beltar's ancient form flickered with grief. The Altani had been founding members of the Council, a peaceful species whose greatest achievement was the development of quantum agriculture that fed dozens of star systems. Now they faced extinction because the Council had handed their enemies the perfect staging ground for war. What about evacuation efforts? The Council's emergency fleet can transport perhaps 5 million civilians before the Corvin complete their operation. Altani planetary population is 18 billion. The mathematics of genocide were brutally simple. For every civilian they saved, over 3,000 would die. The greatest rescue operation in Council history would barely register as a statistical anomaly in the Corvin's systematic extermination campaign. Honored Arbiter interrupted the communications officer. We're receiving distress signals from the Mirilani Collective. Corvin forces have surrounded their crystal cities. They're demanding immediate surrender, or face the same fate as the Altani. Beltar closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 3,000 years of galactic civilization crumbling around her. The Corvin Empire had used humanity's departure as justification for the stability war, claiming that the human exodus proved dangerous instability that required immediate military correction. The Council's own security forces were scattered across 16 sectors, designed for peacekeeping operations rather than full-scale warfare. Meanwhile, in the deep void, Captain James Wright watched the massacre unfold from the bridge of the UES Shadow. His ship was one of 50 human vessels monitoring Council space from positions no alien technology could detect, gathering intelligence on a war that the galaxy's peacekeepers had accidentally enabled. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Torres, his voice tight with controlled anger, "the Corvin have just launched their fourth wave of bombardment against Altani. Prime. Preliminary estimates suggest complete orbital sterilization within 18 hours. Wright's hands clenched into fists as he studied the tactical displays. The Shadow's quantum sensors could track individual Corvin vessels, monitor their communications, even predict their targeting patterns. But standing orders required human forces to remain hidden while gathering intelligence on Council military capabilities. What about Council evacuation efforts? Minimal, sir. Their transport ships are designed for diplomatic missions, not mass civilian rescue. Current projections suggest they might save 5% of the Altani population before the bombardment is complete. Wright turned to his communications officer. "Open a quantum channel to Admiral Rodriguez. Priority override." The main screen flickered to life, showing Rodriguez on the bridge of the Defiance. Behind her, tactical displays tracked human fleet movements throughout the void sectors, as 200 ships prepared for operations their crews hoped would never be necessary. "Captain Wright, I assume you're calling about the Altani situation?" "Yes, ma'am. Request immediate permission to implement Humanitarian Protocol 7. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Protocol 7 would expose humanity's continued presence in the galaxy, revealing capabilities that the Council couldn't imagine, and ending any possibility of remaining hidden while galactic civilization tore itself apart. "Captain, the Altani are not our responsibility. We withdrew from Council space. With respect, Admiral, we withdrew to protect ourselves from Council politics. The Altani are dying because the Council enabled a war by handing our former territories to a military empire." Wright gestured to his tactical display. "Ma'am, the Shadow alone can evacuate 50,000 civilians in emergency conditions. Our full fleet could save every single Altani citizen before the Corvin complete their bombardment." "Captain, that would require revealing our deep space capabilities, our stealth technology, and our true fleet size. We would lose every strategic advantage we've spent decades building." Wright looked around his bridge at officers who had spent months watching the galaxy burn while remaining hidden in the darkness. "Admiral, maybe it's time the galaxy learned that humanity didn't retreat into exile to die. We left to build something the Council never imagined." Through the Shadow's viewports, he could see the distant glow of burning Altani cities, visible even across interstellar distances. 18 billion civilians faced annihilation, while the most advanced human fleet in history sat hidden in the void. "Captain Wright," came another voice as General Patterson's image appeared alongside. "Rodriguez's. You understand what you're proposing? Once we reveal our presence, there's no going back to isolation. General, 18 billion people are about to die because we chose to remain hidden. The Corvin are using our departure as an excuse to commit genocide across multiple star systems. How many species have to be exterminated before we act? Patterson leaned forward. Captain, what's your proposed operation? Wright's expression hardened with determination. Full fleet deployment to Altani space. We evacuate every civilian before the Corvin can complete their bombardment. Then we make it clear to the galaxy that humanity never really left. Rodriguez studied the tactical projections. Captain, the Corvin fleet outguns us significantly in traditional terms. 16 dreadnoughts against our stealth cruisers. Ma'am, the Corvin are using traditional energy weapons and kinetic barriers. Our quantum disruptors will cut through their defenses like tissue paper. They're designed for fighting enemies with technology they understand. Wright paused, letting the implications settle. Admiral, the Council exiled us because they said we were too aggressive, too willing to use force. Maybe it's time we showed them what aggressive really means. Captain, Patterson said slowly, you're proposing to announce humanity's return by defeating the galaxy's most powerful military force and saving a species the Council couldn't protect. Yes, ma'am. The galaxy wanted to know what humanity would do with power. Let's show them. The quantum link fell silent except for the hum of ship systems and the distant vibration of engines designed to cross the void between stars. Wright watched the tactical displays update with fresh reports of Corvin bombardments, each red flash representing thousands of civilian deaths. Captain Wright, Rodriguez finally said, you have authorization to proceed with Protocol 7. Save them all. Wright turned to his crew, noting the mixture of relief and anticipation on their faces. For months they had watched the galaxy burn while remaining hidden in the dark between stars. All stations, prepare for fleet-wide emergence from stealth mode. Navigation, plot a course for Altani Prime. Communications, prepare to broadcast our position to every human vessel in range. Sir, Torres asked quietly, what message should we send to the Altani? Wright smiled for the first time in days, feeling the weight of 14 billion human souls behind his decision. The Council had forced humanity to choose between submission and exile. They had chosen exile, but that didn't mean they would stand by while innocents were slaughtered. Lieutenant Torres, send a message to Altani Prime on all emergency frequencies. Tell them the humans are back. He paused, studying the star charts showing Corvin formations around doomed worlds, and tell them we brought friends. Across the deep void, 200 human vessels received the activation signal, dropping their stealth systems and revealing their presence to a galaxy that thought they had vanished into empty space. Ships equipped with technology the Council had never imagined, crewed by people who had chosen freedom over security, now moved toward their first engagement with the forces of galactic conquest. The Council had wanted to know whether humanity was too dangerous to trust with power. They were about to find out that the most dangerous thing in the galaxy wasn't someone who sought power for its own sake. It was someone willing to use power to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, regardless of what it cost them in the end. The first sign that everything had changed came when 18 billion Altani survivors found themselves aboard ships that shouldn't exist, rescued by a species the galaxy thought had vanished into the void between stars. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the massive cargo bay of the UES Liberation, watching as the final refugee transport docked with impossible precision. Around her, Altani families clutched their few possessions, their large silver eyes reflecting confusion and hope as they tried to process what had happened to them. 3 days ago they had been facing extinction. Now they found themselves aboard vessels whose technology exceeded anything in Council space. Ambassador, called Dr. Marcus Chen, the ship's chief medical officer, final evacuation count is confirmed. 18.3 billion Altani civilians successfully rescued. Vasquez nodded, though the number still seemed impossible. In 72 hours, humanity had evacuated the entire population of 16 Altani worlds, while the Corvin fleet systematically destroyed empty cities. The Council's evacuation plan would have saved perhaps 5 million people. Ma'am, interrupted Captain Sarah Kim, priority transmission from Admiral Rodriguez aboard the Defiance. The cargo bay's main screen activated, showing Rodriguez standing before a tactical display that revealed the true scope of humanity's return. Behind her, dozens of ship icons moved through space in patterns that defied everything the Council thought they knew about human capabilities. Ambassador Vasquez, Rodriguez began. Phase 1 humanitarian operations are complete. All Altani civilians are secure in human custody. Prepare for Phase 2. Vasquez felt a familiar chill. Admiral, we've already exceeded every reasonable objective. The Altani are safe. Surely we've made our point. The point, Ambassador, was never just about saving the Altani. Rodriguez gestured to the tactical display behind her. Intelligence reports confirm Corvan forces are moving against 3 more targets: the Miralani Collective, the Zentori Republic, and ultimately the Council's administrative worlds. Total projected casualties exceed 40 billion sentients. The display shifted to show Corvan fleet movements across Council space, their advance spreading like a plague through regions that had known peace for millennia. Their strategy was brutally efficient. Destroy orbital defenses, eliminate government centers, then systematically exterminate populations they deemed inferior. What are you proposing, Admiral? Rodriguez's expression hardened. The Council exiled us because they said humanity was too aggressive, too expansionist, too dangerous for galactic civilization. Perhaps it's time we showed them exactly what dangerous looks like when we stop holding back. Across the deep void, similar conversations were taking place aboard 200 human vessels. Ships that had been constructed in secret shipyards using resources the Council considered worthless, crewed by volunteers who had chosen exile over submission, equipped with technology that made them invisible to alien sensors. Captain Diana Foster stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, studying tactical displays that tracked Corvan fleet movements toward the Zentori Republic. Her vessel was part of Battle Group 7, 12 ships designed for a very specific purpose that the galaxy was about to discover. Captain, reported her weapons officer, massive Corvan formations detected moving toward Zentori Prime. Current estimates suggest orbital bombardment will begin within 36 hours. Foster nodded grimly. The Zentori had been among the Council's founding members, a proud warrior culture that had abandoned conquest centuries ago in favor of peaceful exploration. Their defensive fleet was brave but hopelessly outmatched by Corvan military technology. Communications: open a channel to all Battle Group 7 commanders. The bridge's main screen divided into 11 sections, each showing the captain of another human warship. These officers had spent months in the void between stars, training for operations they hoped would never be necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, Foster began, in approximately 6 hours we will engage a Corvan battle fleet that outnumbers us 12 to 1. They possess superior firepower, advanced armor, and centuries of combat experience. She paused, studying the faces of her fellow commanders. Any concerns? Captain Williams of the UES Vengeance spoke first. Captain Foster, what makes us think we can win against those odds? Foster's smile was predatory, because while the Council was limiting our expansion, we were developing technology they couldn't imagine. While they were debating our territorial rights, we were building weapons they don't know how to counter. She gestured to her tactical officer, who overlaid new information on the shared display. The Corvan fleet uses traditional energy shielding and composite armor. Our quantum disruptors bypass both completely. Their sensors operate on electromagnetic principles that our stealth systems were specifically designed to fool. Their battle doctrine assumes enemies will engage at maximum range using conventional weapons. And we won't be doing that, Williams said, understanding dawning in his voice. No, Captain Williams. We're going to appear in the middle of their formation and destroy them before they understand what's happening to them. Captain Torres of the UES Judgment leaned forward. Captain Foster, this will expose everything. Our stealth capabilities, our weapons technology, our true fleet strength. After this engagement, we can't pretend to be a minor species anymore. Foster nodded slowly. Captain Torres, humanity stopped being a minor species the moment we chose exile over submission. The galaxy just doesn't know it yet. She turned to address all her fellow commanders. The Council feared our aggression, our expansion, our willingness to use force to achieve our objectives. They were absolutely right to fear us. The quantum link carried her words to 12 human vessels, preparing for their first combat engagement against galactic military forces. But they made one critical error in their calculations. They assumed that dangerous meant conquest, that aggression meant oppression, that power meant domination. Foster paused, studying the tactical projections showing Corvan fleets moving toward defenseless worlds. Today we show the galaxy what human aggression really means when it's directed at those who threaten innocence. All ships, Prepare for quantum stealth insertion. Will emerge directly in their formation and engage at close range. Target their command vessels first. Cut off their coordination before they can adapt to our capabilities. 6 hours later, the Corvin Imperial fleet arrived at Centauri Prime in perfect formation, their dreadnoughts arranged in the classical siege pattern that had conquered 17 civilizations. Admiral Zareth studied the Centauri home system from the bridge of his flagship, calculating how long it would take to reduce their defenses to debris. "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, "enemy forces detected. 42 Centauri vessels maintaining defensive positions around their homeworld." Zareth's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The Centauri Republic could barely muster 50 ships for their final stand. "Begin the bombardment. I want their government centers destroyed within 4 hours." But as the Corvin fleet moved into attack formation, space itself seemed to twist and fold around them. 12 human vessels materialized where none had existed moments before, appearing directly in the center of the Corvin formation like ghosts becoming solid. "Admiral," his sensor operator shouted in alarm. "Unknown vessels appearing in our midst. How did they penetrate our detection grid?" The question was answered as the UES Retribution opened fire. Captain Foster watched her tactical display with cold satisfaction as quantum disruptor beams tore through Corvin shields like they were made of paper. Around her, 11 other human vessels unleashed weapons technology that the galaxy's most advanced military had never encountered. "Target their command ships," Foster ordered. "Let's eliminate their coordination before they adapt." The Corvin fleet reacted with trained efficiency, but their doctrine assumed enemies would fight at range with conventional weapons. Human vessels moved through their formation like sharks among minnows, appearing and disappearing as their stealth systems overwhelmed Corvin sensors. "All Corvin ships. This is Captain Diana Foster of the United Earth Forces." She broadcast on all frequencies. "You are outmatched and surrounded. Surrender immediately and withdraw from Centauri space." Admiral Zareth's image appeared on Foster's screen, his reptilian features twisted with rage and confusion. "Human, your species fled the galaxy. How do you possess such technology?" Foster's expression was professional ice. "Admiral Zareth, humanity didn't flee. We left council space because we were tired of being told we were too dangerous." She paused as another Corvin dreadnought disappeared under human fire. "Perhaps now you understand why the council was concerned." Around them, the most powerful fleet in galactic history found itself helpless against enemies who could appear anywhere, strike with impossible weapons, then vanish before return fire could target them. The war the Council had accidentally enabled was about to end in a way no one had anticipated. Humanity had returned, and they were rewriting the rules of galactic warfare with technology that made traditional military doctrine obsolete. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you pushed the most adaptive species in known space into exile and gave them time to prepare for their return. 6 months after humanity's exodus from Council space, the Galactic Assembly Hall had been transformed into a war room, where the representatives of 700 species watched their civilization collapse in real time. Emergency displays showed Corvin battle fleets surrendering across 16 star systems as human vessels appeared from nowhere to end conflicts that traditional military forces couldn't contain. High Arbiter Veltar stood before the central tactical display, her ancient form flickering with exhaustion as she tried to comprehend reports that defied everything the Council understood about warfare and technology. The species they had exiled for being too dangerous had just ended the greatest military crisis in galactic history in a matter of days. "Status report on Corvin military capabilities," she demanded, her 4 eyes dim with fatigue. Counselor Thane's translator struggled with his rapid clicking as he delivered impossible news. "Honored Arbiter, the Corvin Imperial fleet has suffered complete strategic defeat. Over 400 vessels destroyed or captured. Admiral Zareth himself surrendered his flagship after human forces demonstrated they could disable his ship's life support systems remotely." Veltar's form solidified as the implications hit her. The Corvin Empire had possessed the most advanced military in galactic space, their technology refined through centuries of conquest. Yet they had been defeated by a species the Council had dismissed as dangerously primitive just months earlier. "How many human casualties?" "Unknown, Honored Arbiter. Human forces report 0 losses across all engagements. The chamber fell into stunned silence. 0 losses while defeating the galaxy's greatest military power was beyond impossible. It suggested technology so advanced that traditional warfare had become obsolete. What about civilian casualties from the conflicts? The humans have transported over 60 billion refugees from war zones to safety. Complete species evacuations from the Altani, Miralani, and Centauri systems. No civilian populations remain in danger. Veltar closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 3 millennia of galactic governance crumbling around her understanding. The Council had exiled humanity for being too aggressive to trust with power. Instead, humans had used that power to save every threatened civilian while ending the war in less time than traditional peace negotiations typically required. "Honored Arbiter," interrupted her communications officer. "We're receiving a transmission from Admiral Rodriguez of the United Earth Forces." The chamber's massive display activated, showing Rodriguez standing on the bridge of a vessel whose design exceeded anything in Council databases. Behind her, tactical screens showed human ships positioned throughout the galaxy, not conquering territory but protecting trade routes and escorting refugee convoys. "High Arbiter Veltar," Rodriguez began, her voice carrying across the assembly. "With quiet authority, the threat to galactic civilian populations has been neutralized. We are prepared to transfer custody of 67 billion rescued refugees to appropriate Council authorities." Veltar found her voice with difficulty. "Admiral Rodriguez, the Council did not request human intervention in this crisis." "No," Rodriguez replied simply. "You did not. You exiled us for being too aggressive, too expansionist, too dangerous for civilized space. Your assessment of human nature was completely accurate. Then why intervene? Why save populations that are not your responsibility?" Rodriguez's expression never changed as she delivered words that would reshape galactic politics. "High Arbiter, the Council spent centuries debating whether humanity could be trusted with power. You never asked what we would do when innocents faced extinction while their protectors stood paralyzed by procedure and politics." She gestured to the tactical displays behind her. "You feared our expansion, our growth, our refusal to accept limitations. You were right to fear these traits. But you never considered what happened when those same traits were directed toward protecting rather than conquering." Veltar struggled to process the implications. "Admiral Rodriguez, your species possesses military technology that makes our security forces obsolete. Your fleet capabilities exceed anything we imagined possible. What does humanity want from the Council?" "Nothing, High Arbiter. Humanity, no longer requires Council approval, Council trade networks, or Council protection. We have our own territories now, our own allies, our own definition of galactic law." "And what is that definition?" Rodriguez's smile was barely visible but somehow carried across the vast chamber. "That civilizations capable of protecting innocents have a responsibility to do so, regardless of political boundaries or diplomatic protocols." She paused, letting the words settle among 700 species who had just witnessed their fundamental assumptions about power and responsibility proven wrong. The Council wanted to know what humanity would do with unrestricted power. "Look around you, High Arbiter. We save people. But at what cost to galactic stability? Your intervention has demonstrated that Council military forces are inadequate for major threats. Our authority, your authority," Rodriguez interrupted gently, "was never based on military strength. It was based on the consent of species who believed the Council could protect them. That consent was shattered when you enabled a war of extinction by handing military staging areas to the galaxy's most aggressive empire." Veltar's ancient mind reeled as she realized the truth. The Council's authority had indeed been based on the perception that they could maintain peace and protect member species. Their failure to prevent the Corvan War, combined with humanity's dramatic intervention, had exposed the fundamental weakness of their system. "What do you propose for the future of galactic governance?" "That's not humanity's decision to make," Rodriguez replied. "We chose independence over integration, remember? But we will continue to protect civilian populations from military aggression, regardless of their political affiliations." She turned to address the entire assembly. "The galaxy accused us of being too dangerous to trust with power. You were correct about our capacity for destruction, but you never understood that the same traits that make us dangerous also make us unwilling to stand by while innocents suffer. Admiral Rodriguez paused, studying the representatives of 700 species who had just learned that the balance of galactic power had shifted permanently. The Council can continue to govern through consensus and diplomacy. Humanity will handle situations that require more direct solutions. Admiral, Veltar asked quietly, will humanity ever return to Council space? We never left, High Arbiter. We just stopped asking permission to do what was right. As the transmission ended, Veltar stared at the empty display, finally understanding what the Council had lost when they forced humanity into exile. They had feared human aggression, human expansion, human willingness to use force. But they had also lost human conscience, human determination, and human refusal to accept that some problems were too difficult to solve. The galaxy had realized, too late, that humanity's quiet departure was indeed a declaration of war. Not against the Council, but against anyone who would threaten innocence while their supposed protectors remained paralyzed by politics and procedure. In the deep void, Admiral Rodriguez looked out at stars that now flew under the protection of a species the galaxy had tried to exile. The Council had judged humanity too dangerous for their civilization. They had been absolutely correct. But they had never asked the right question. Not whether humanity was dangerous, but to whom. The galaxy was discovering that the most dangerous enemy you could face wasn't someone who sought power for conquest or domination. It was someone willing to use unlimited power to protect those who couldn't protect themselves regardless of political boundaries or diplomatic consequences. And humanity had just announced that they were back, they were staying, and they would define their own role in galactic affairs. The Council could continue governing through debate and consensus. Humanity would handle everything else. The war was over. The real change was just beginning.